Stop! Don't shake her hand! The words sliced through the room, sharp as broken glass. The ballroom fell into stunned silence as the elegant figure of Ava Parker, a young black woman in her late 20s, reached her hand toward Graham Wilder, the billionaire tech mogul known for his charm and cold, calculating mind. But before her fingers could touch his, he recoiled, his sharp blue eyes narrowing as if the very touch of her hand might burn him. The guests around them stiffened, their gazes shifting from Ava to Graham, unsure of what to do. Ava's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the heat of humiliation rising in her cheeks, but she stood her ground, her hands still outstretched. She wasn't used to being treated like this, especially not in a room full of influential people, but she would not let him see the pain it caused her. Graham, noticing the silence, forced a laugh, brushing it off as a joke. "I'm not shaking her hand," he muttered loud enough for a few nearby to hear. "It's nothing personal, just protocols." His voice, cold and dismissive, left Ava standing there like an outsider, her palms still open, waiting for a handshake that would never come. She turned away quickly, the sting of rejection burning deep within her. She walked across the room with her head held high, the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, but her pride intact. As she moved, she could feel the eyes of the room on her, some sympathetic, others judgmental, but none daring to challenge Graham Wilder. He was untouchable. But little did he know, Ava wasn't someone to be overlooked, nor forgotten. The night wore on, the music playing softly in the background, the hum of conversation filling the air. Yet Ava's mind wasn't on the event or the people around her. It was on one thing: her work. Despite the subtle sneers, despite the years of rejection and ridicule, she had made it this far. She was in the room, and she was going to prove her worth. As the night wore on, Graham continued to ignore her, his pride not allowing him to even acknowledge his mistake. But something shifted in him as he watched Ava interact with others. The calm intelligence in her voice, the way she handled herself, she was no ordinary woman. She was someone to be reckoned with. It unsettled him. For the first time in his life, he felt the sting of his own arrogance. He was used to being in control, used to people respecting him because of his wealth, his influence, but here was a woman who wouldn't be swayed by it. He tried to dismiss the feeling, to shove it away, but it lingered, gnawing at him. The evening ended, and Ava left the ballroom, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. As she stepped out into the cool night air, she felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. She had done nothing wrong, and she was going to let her success speak for itself. But Graham was left behind, his mind spinning. The woman he had so carelessly dismissed had something that he could no longer ignore. He tried to convince himself that it didn't matter, but deep down, he knew he had made a mistake. He had underestimated her, and it was a mistake he couldn't easily shake off. The next morning, Graham sat at his desk, his fingers drumming against the polished wood. He had tried to put the events of the previous night out of his mind, but they kept creeping back. Ava Parker. He couldn't shake her from his thoughts. He thought back to how she had walked away without a word, without hesitation, as though the sting of his rejection didn't matter to her. But he knew it did. It had to. No one walked away from someone like him without a reaction. It troubled him. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his assistant, Carla, knocking on the door. "Mr. Wilder, there's someone here to see you," she said, poking her head in. "It's Ava Parker." His stomach churned. He wasn't sure what he expected, but it wasn't this. He had thought about reaching out to her, apologizing for his behavior, but he never expected her to come to him. "Send her in," he said, trying to mask the nervousness in his voice. Ava entered the room with a confident stride, her head held high, just as it had been the previous night. She was wearing a sharp, professional suit, the color of which matched her determination. Graham stood up, trying to project calm, but he could feel his pulse quickening. He wasn't used to being on the back foot. "Ms. Parker," he greeted her, his voice steady but his eyes betraying him. "What can I do for you?" Ava's eyes met his, and for a moment, he saw the quiet strength she carried within her. I need your help, she said, her voice calm and direct, without a hint of bitterness despite the way he had treated her. I'm working on a project that could benefit both of us. I believe your company is the perfect fit for it. Graham raised an eyebrow, surprised by her composed demeanor. She had walked into his office as if she had every right to be there, and in a way, she did. He had underestimated her last night, but today, she was here, standing as an equal. I didn't expect this, Graham said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Why me? Ava smiled slightly, and there was a touch of warmth in her expression. Because despite everything, I believe you're capable of more than what you showed last night. You have power, Graham. But power alone isn't enough. It's how you use it that matters. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had spent years building his empire, convinced that power and wealth were all that mattered, but Ava was challenging that belief with nothing more than her presence and her conviction. He shifted in his seat, suddenly feeling exposed. You're not going to beg for my help? He asked, half expecting her to revert to some form of desperation. No, Ava replied, her eyes unwavering. I'm here to offer you a chance to make a real impact. Whether or not you take it is up to you. Graham didn't know what to say. He had built his entire career on control, on making others need him. But here was this woman, someone he had dismissed so easily, offering him an opportunity without asking for anything in return. It left him speechless. Ava took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. You may not like me, Graham, but that doesn't matter. I'm here because I believe in what I can do, and what you can do if you choose to. She paused for a moment, then added, The choice is yours. Graham sat back in his chair, the weight of her words pressing down on him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was being offered something he couldn't buy. It was as if the power he had always relied on had suddenly lost its grip on him. He looked at Ava, and this time, he saw her as more than just a woman he had rejected. He saw someone who was his equal, someone who could make a real difference, and someone who had more strength and integrity than he had ever given her credit for. All right, he said, his voice softer than usual. Let's hear about this project. Ava's eyes lit up, the slightest hint of a smile forming on her lips. She had known all along that this was the way forward. She wasn't asking for his pity, and she wasn't going to settle for his approval. She was here to make her mark, and Graham Wilder, for the first time, was going to help her do it. I'm not sure why I agreed to this, Graham thought, his fingers drumming lightly on his desk as Ava Parker's words echoed in his mind. It had been 2 weeks since their meeting, and things had been moving at an unexpected pace. Ava had pitched her idea, a community-driven tech platform designed to bridge the gap between underserved communities and the resources they needed, using the very technology Graham had spent his life perfecting. He had been skeptical at first. After all, it wasn't the type of project he typically invested in. But somehow, the more he listened, the more he saw the potential. Ava wasn't just another entrepreneur looking for a handout. She was someone who had already achieved so much despite the odds, and it struck something deep within him. As he sat in his office that morning, he found himself contemplating the future, wondering just how far this partnership could go. Graham, we're ready. Ava's voice interrupted his thoughts. She stood in the doorway, a determined look on her face as usual, yet there was a quiet excitement in her eyes. She was ready. He could see it in the way she held herself, confident, capable, unafraid. His initial reluctance had been replaced by something else. A curiosity. A willingness to see where this could lead. I know, Graham replied, his voice steady but tinged with an unexpected warmth. Let's make this happen. Ava smiled, and for the first time since meeting her, he saw a side of her that was both genuine and inviting, not the guarded exterior she usually wore. He followed her out of the office and into the conference room, where the team had gathered. The first presentation had been rough, full of technical jargon and lofty goals, but this time, it was different. This time, it felt personal. They were no longer two separate entities, the cold, calculating billionaire and the ambitious young woman, but two people with a shared purpose. As Ava spoke, Graham couldn't help but notice the shift in the room. Her words were clear, concise, and confident, and her passion was contagious. His team, initially hesitant about her involvement, was starting to get on board. One by one, they nodded in agreement, their initial skepticism fading away. When Ava finished her pitch, there was a moment of silence. Graham took a deep breath, his mind racing with the possibilities. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was about to be part of something that truly mattered. "All right," he said, his voice carrying the weight of the decision. "Let's do it. Let's build this." Ava's eyes lit up, and for the briefest of moments, Graham saw a flash of gratitude, something he hadn't expected. She wasn't looking for a handout. She wasn't looking for recognition. She just wanted the chance to make a difference. And in that moment, Graham realized something important. Ava wasn't just the person he had underestimated. She was the person who had made him see the world differently. As the team began to brainstorm and set plans into motion, Graham felt a sense of pride in what they were about to embark on. It wasn't just about the money, the power, or the influence. It was about the change they could create together. Ava had shown him that success wasn't defined by wealth or status, but by the impact one could make on others. Graham had spent years chasing his own version of success, but in that moment, he realized that his definition of success was incomplete. It was time to rewrite that definition. It was time to build something that would last far beyond the profits of a business venture. Ava had opened his eyes to the kind of success that truly mattered, the kind that changed lives. And as he watched her lead the team, his respect for her only grew. She wasn't just capable. She was extraordinary. She had the power to make him better, to make everyone around her better. And Graham Wilder wasn't going to stand in her way anymore. "I don't know what I was expecting," Graham thought as he sat in his penthouse, looking out over the city lights. The meeting had gone well, better than he could have imagined, really. Ava had brought the team together in a way he never could have done on his own. But it wasn't just the success of the project that weighed on his mind. It was something deeper. Something that had been growing ever since he had first dismissed her at that gala. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how much he had misjudged her. Ava Parker was unlike anyone he had ever met. She didn't care about his wealth, his status, or his connections. She cared about the work. And that was something Graham had never truly understood until now. He had spent so many years building his empire, chasing power and recognition. But as he watched Ava command the room during their latest brainstorming session, he realized that she was already doing what he had always dreamed of, creating real change. He had seen the passion in her eyes when she talked about helping communities who had been overlooked for far too long. It wasn't just about making money or getting ahead. It was about giving people a voice. And that was something Graham had never considered. That night, Graham found himself reaching for his phone, dialing a number he hadn't called in years. "Carla, get me Ava Parker's number," he said, his voice steady, though something in his chest felt tight. He hadn't planned on calling her tonight. But the idea had been nagging at him, pulling at him like a thread that wouldn't let go. A few minutes later, Carla sent him Ava's contact info, and without thinking, he hit dial. The phone rang twice before Ava picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was warm, but there was an edge to it, like she had been waiting for something. "Ava, it's Graham. I wanted to talk." There was a brief silence on the other end before she responded, her voice calm but curious. "What about? I think we need to take the project to the next level. I've been thinking a lot about where we go from here, and I have some ideas," he said, trying to keep the uncertainty out of his voice. There was a long pause before Ava spoke again. "You're serious?" "Yes," Graham replied, his voice firm now. "I think we can do more than just launch this project. I want to help you take it further. I want to make sure it succeeds." Ava was silent for a moment, and Graham felt a nervousness twist in his stomach. He had never been good at asking for help, but this felt different. This felt like something worth pursuing. Finally, she spoke. I've never heard you talk like this before. What changed? Graham took a deep breath, staring out at the skyline, his mind racing. I was wrong about you, Ava. I misjudged you. And I think I've been looking at the world the wrong way. You're doing something that matters. You're not just building a business. You're changing lives. Ava was quiet again, and for a moment, Graham wondered if he had said too much. But then, slowly, she spoke. I appreciate that, Graham. Really. But I need you to understand something. This project isn't about me. It's about the people we're helping. I want to make sure you're on the same page with that. Graham nodded, even though she couldn't see him. I am. I'm all in, Ava. All right, she said, her voice warming. Let's make it happen. The next day, Graham arrived at the office early, the weight of his decision still heavy on his mind. He was used to being the one calling the shots, used to people listening when he spoke. But now, it felt different. Ava was the one leading this project, and Graham was just along for the ride. And for the first time in a long time, he was okay with that. As the day went on, Graham found himself watching Ava work, observing the way she engaged with the team, the way she inspired them to give their best. He couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect for her. She wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a force of nature. And she had shown him a new path, a path where success wasn't defined by wealth or power, but by the difference you made in the world. By the end of the day, Graham knew that this was only the beginning. He was ready to step back and let Ava take the lead. She had already proven that she was the one with the vision, the one who could make this work. And as much as he had been hesitant to admit it before, Graham finally understood that it wasn't about him anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about making a real impact. And for the first time in a long time, Graham Wilder felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. It's been a month since Graham decided to take a step back, and Ava's project was beginning to take shape in ways that neither of them had expected. The community tech platform was not only gaining traction but was beginning to change lives. Ava was working tirelessly, leading the team with a level of passion and determination that was contagious. Graham watched from the sidelines, impressed and inspired by her every move. He had always thought that he understood what it meant to lead, but Ava had shown him what true leadership looked like. It wasn't about giving orders or exerting power over others. It was about empowering others to rise with you, to help them see their own potential, and use it to build something greater than any individual. Late one evening, as he sat alone in his office reflecting on the success of the project, his phone buzzed. It was Ava. We need to talk, the message read. His heart skipped a beat. They had already gone through numerous meetings, and Ava had already been managing everything so smoothly. What more could there be to discuss? He quickly typed a response. What's going on? The reply came almost instantly. It's about the next phase of the project. We have an opportunity, but it's risky. I need your support. Graham's curiosity piqued. He had never seen Ava so direct, so determined in her message. He felt the familiar knot of nervous anticipation in his stomach, but this time, it was different. He wasn't scared. He was ready. He texted back. I'll meet you tomorrow. Let's talk. The next morning, Graham and Ava sat in the same conference room where they had once met so formally, but today, things were different. The energy in the room was electric with potential, and both of them could feel it. Ava leaned forward, her hands on the table, her eyes locked on Graham. I've been thinking about how we can expand, she said, her voice calm yet fierce with determination. The platform is working, but we need to reach more people faster. I'm talking about scaling this thing globally. Graham listened intently, his hands clasped together in front of him. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when they could push beyond what they had originally planned. He could see the fire in Ava's eyes, and it sparked something inside him. For the first time in years, Graham wasn't just an investor or a businessman. He was part of something that was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. What's the catch? He asked, his voice steady. Ava paused for a moment, then continued. We're going to need funding, significant funding. And it's going to take more than just the resources we have now. We'll need to convince investors who might not see the value in this yet. We need them to see what we're doing, not just as a business, but as a movement. Graham nodded, understanding the gravity of what she was asking. He had spent years courting investors, making deals, and gaining influence, but this was different. Ava wasn't asking for a check. She was asking for his belief. And you think I'm the one who can help you with that? He asked. Ava's expression softened, but there was still a determined edge to her voice. I know you, Graham. You've built something incredible. And now you have a chance to help others do the same. You can help us change the world, not just by writing a check, but by putting your name behind it. People will listen. For the first time in months, Graham felt a sense of clarity. He had spent so much of his life building his empire, but he had never truly felt like it was for something greater than himself. Ava had shown him what that could look like. He wasn't just here to make more money or gain more power. He was here to make a difference. All right, Graham said, his voice firm with resolve. Let's do it. Let's take this global. Ava smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that spoke volumes. Thank you, Graham. I knew you'd get it. As they began to discuss the next steps in detail, Graham couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they were about to do. This wasn't just a business venture, it was a movement, and he was going to be a part of it. Ava had opened his eyes to something he hadn't seen before. It wasn't about the money or the recognition. It was about the impact they could make together. And for the first time in a long time, Graham realized that this was exactly where he was meant to be. The weeks following their decision to scale the project were a blur of activity. Ava, Graham, and the team worked tirelessly, creating pitch decks, reaching out to potential investors, and refining the platform. It wasn't just a business anymore. It was a cause, a mission to change the way technology was used to uplift the underserved communities that had been overlooked for far too long. Graham was in meetings all day, helping Ava secure the necessary funding. There were times when he felt out of his depth, especially when he realized just how much he had taken his wealth and influence for granted. Ava, however, was always calm, always clear, and her belief in the project never wavered. As the final pitch meeting approached, Graham could feel the tension mounting. The room was filled with the most influential investors in the tech world, and they were skeptical. The stakes were high. Ava stood at the front of the room, poised and confident, presenting the vision that had consumed her for years. Graham sat at the table, observing her with a newfound respect. He had watched her grow over the past few months, not just as an entrepreneur, but as someone who could lead with integrity, drive, and heart. When it was Graham's turn to speak, he stood up and addressed the room. I've spent my life building a business empire, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But in doing so, I've realized that success isn't just about making money or gaining influence. It's about creating something that lasts. Something that makes a real difference. Ava has shown me that it's not enough to just chase profits. We have a responsibility to use our resources to change lives. This platform is more than a business, it's a movement. And I believe in it. I believe in Ava. The room was silent for a moment, and Graham could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He didn't know if he had convinced them, but he knew one thing for sure: he was all in. The investors looked at each other, exchanging glances. And then, slowly, one by one, they nodded. The deal was made. Ava's platform was going to be funded, and the next phase of their journey was about to begin. As they left the meeting, Ava turned to Graham with a smile that reached her eyes. We did it, she said, her voice full of disbelief. Graham smiled back, but there was something different in his expression. No, Ava, he said, his voice calm but filled with conviction. You did it. You made this happen. Ava shook her head, a slight laugh escaping her lips. We both did. Graham paused, looking at her with admiration. You've taught me more than I could ever teach you, he said. I didn't realize it before, but this is what I've been missing. It's not just about the money. It's about the impact we can have on the world. And I'm glad I'm here, helping you make it happen. They stood there for a moment, the weight of the past few months settling in. For Graham, it was a realization that everything he had built, everything he had worked for, had led him to this point. It was no longer about building a legacy of wealth or power. It was about building something that would outlast him, a legacy of change, of impact, of lifting others up. Ava's eyes softened, and she reached out, placing her hand on his arm. "We're just getting started," she said. And Graham knew she was right. This was just the beginning. Together, they were going to change the world. And for the first time in his life, Graham truly believed it. The days that followed their successful pitch were a whirlwind. Ava and Graham, now fully committed to making their vision a reality, dove into the next phase of the project. With the funding secured, the team expanded, bringing in more experts, developers, and strategists to help build the platform to scale. Ava, as usual, was in the thick of it, organizing meetings, discussing plans, and ensuring the project was moving forward. Graham, however, had started to feel something he had never experienced before: humility. He had always been the one in charge, the one making the decisions. But now, he was following Ava's lead, trusting her expertise, and witnessing her ability to inspire those around her. He marveled at how effortlessly she took charge, yet how grounded and humble she remained. There were moments when he caught himself listening to her ideas, feeling truly moved by her passion and vision. It was clear that this wasn't just a project to her, it was her life's work. Late one evening, as Graham sat in his office, reviewing reports and preparing for another round of investor meetings, Ava walked in. She had a determined look on her face, a slight tension in her posture that Graham immediately noticed. "What's going on?" he asked, looking up from his desk. Ava hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking about the future," she said. "We've done a lot in a short amount of time, but I want to make sure we're not losing sight of the people we're here for." Graham raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Ava walked over to the window, looking out over the city. "I don't want us to get so caught up in scaling the business that we forget why we're doing this in the first place. We're building a platform to help those who have been left behind, people who don't have access to the resources they need. But if we focus only on profit and growth, we might lose that focus." Graham sat back in his chair, taking in her words. He hadn't considered that. He had been so focused on the technical aspects of the project, on the logistics and the numbers, that he hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. He had gotten lost in the excitement of success, in the idea of taking this project global, that he hadn't thought about the very people they were trying to help. "You're right," he said, the weight of her words settling in. "We can't forget who we're doing this for." Ava turned to face him, her eyes serious. "Exactly. We need to make sure that every decision we make is in line with our mission. We need to stay grounded, no matter how big we get. We can't lose sight of our purpose." Graham nodded, feeling a sense of responsibility wash over him. Ava had a way of cutting through the noise, of reminding him of the core values that had driven him to get involved in the first place. She had a clarity of purpose that he admired. "I won't forget," he said, his voice firm with resolve. Ava smiled, a rare, warm smile that reached her eyes. "I know you won't." The conversation lingered in Graham's mind long after Ava left his office. He realized that he had been so wrapped up in the potential for growth, for success, that he had lost sight of the real impact they could have. It wasn't just about numbers or investors. It was about the people who needed this platform the most. The next morning, as they prepared for a major presentation to a new round of investors, Graham stood up before the team. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, his voice steady and clear. "And I want to make sure we're all on the same page. This isn't just about building a business. This is about making a difference. We're here to help people, and we can't lose sight of that. We need to build something that will truly change lives, not just the bottom line." The room was silent for a moment, and then one by one, the team nodded in agreement. Ava smiled from across the room, her eyes meeting Graham's with a look of pride. It was the first time Graham truly felt like they were a team. Not just partners in business, but partners in a mission. As they prepared for the presentation, Graham knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and obstacles. But with Ava leading the way, he felt more confident than ever. This was more than just a project. This was the beginning of something that would leave a lasting impact on the world. And for the first time in his life, Graham was ready to do whatever it took to make that happen. The months flew by, and with each passing day, Ava's platform grew. They had expanded into new markets, reached more people, and were now seen as a beacon of hope for those who had long been left behind. But as the business flourished, the weight of their success began to press down on Graham. He had always been driven by the desire to build something monumental, but now that it was happening, he found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about success. He spent late nights in his office, staring out at the city lights, reflecting on how far they had come. Ava had been right all along. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the people they were helping. But the responsibility that came with their success was heavy. Ava, on the other hand, seemed to thrive in the chaos. She was constantly surrounded by meetings, calls, and decisions, yet she remained grounded, always focused on the mission. Graham admired her resilience. She had an unwavering belief in their work, and it was contagious. As their reach expanded, they began to face opposition. Competitors who saw Ava's platform as a threat, investors who doubted their ability to maintain growth, and critics who questioned whether they could truly change the world. But Ava was undeterred. She had faced adversity her entire life, and this was no different. One evening, as they prepared for a major pitch to a group of high-profile investors, Graham couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The pressure was mounting, and the stakes had never been higher. Ava walked into his office, her expression calm as always. "You all right?" she asked, sensing the unease in his demeanor. "Yeah," Graham replied, though his voice didn't quite match his words. I don't know if we can keep this up. The competition is fierce, and we've built something incredible, but what if we can't keep going?" Ava stepped closer, her gaze steady and unyielding. "We will keep going," she said simply. "We've built this on purpose. It's not just a business, Graham. It's a movement. And movements don't stop." Graham looked at her, his mind racing. She had always been the one with the answers, the one who could keep pushing forward no matter how difficult things got. He had relied on her strength, but now, for the first time, he realized that he needed to be strong too. "You're right," he said, standing up and meeting her eyes. "We're not stopping. Not now. Not ever." The day of the pitch arrived, and the tension in the room was palpable. Investors from across the country had gathered to hear about the platform's success and its future plans. Graham and Ava stood at the front, ready to make their case. As Ava spoke, her words flowed with a quiet intensity. She wasn't selling a product, she was selling a vision, a future where people could access the resources they needed to succeed. She spoke about the communities they had helped, the lives they had touched, and the impact they were making. It wasn't about the profits. It was about the people. As Graham watched her speak, he realized that this was what he had been missing all along. He had spent so much time chasing success that he had forgotten why it mattered in the first place. But Ava had never forgotten. And now, either would he. When the pitch ended, the room was silent. The investors sat, listening, processing the information they had just heard. Graham held his breath, unsure of what would come next. Finally, one of the investors stood and spoke. "We believe in you," he said, his voice strong. "We believe in the work you're doing. We're in." The room erupted in applause, and Graham felt a wave of relief wash over him. But it wasn't just the money or the deal. It was the realization that they had built something real. Something that mattered. As they left the meeting, Ava turned to Graham with a smile. "We did it," she said, her voice full of pride. "We're going to change the world." Graham nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. He had spent his life chasing the wrong things. But now, he knew he was on the right path. He wasn't just building a legacy of wealth. He was building a legacy of impact. And with Ava by his side, he knew they could accomplish anything. The months passed, and Ava's platform became more than just a business, it became a movement. Their success wasn't measured in revenue alone, but in the lives they touched, the communities they uplifted, and the opportunities they provided to those who had been overlooked for far too long. The work was hard, and the challenges never stopped, but Ava never wavered. She was the steady force, the one who kept everyone focused on the mission. Graham, however, had been grappling with something deep inside. As the project grew, so did his sense of responsibility. He had started this journey alongside Ava, but now, he realized just how much of an impact their work was having. It wasn't just about changing the world, it was about changing themselves. Ava had taught him more than he could have imagined. She had shown him that true success wasn't about wealth or power, it was about the people, the communities, the lives they were changing every single day. He had spent his entire career chasing an image of success that had always felt empty, but now, for the first time in his life, he felt fulfilled. One afternoon, as Graham sat in his office, he received a call from Ava. "We need to talk," she said. There was an urgency in her voice that he hadn't heard before. He could feel the weight of it immediately. "What's going on?" he asked, his heart beating faster. "It's about the future of the platform," she replied. "I think we're ready to expand even further. But it's going to require some difficult decisions." Graham nodded, even though Ava couldn't see him. He had learned to trust her instincts, and if she was suggesting this, it was because she believed it was the right move. "What do we need to do?" he asked, his voice steady. Ava took a deep breath. "We need to form strategic partnerships with other organizations. We need to start thinking bigger. If we really want to help people at a global scale, we can't do it alone anymore." Graham's mind began to race. He had always preferred to operate independently, but Ava was right. They had come as far as they could on their own. It was time to take the next step. "Okay," he said, his resolve firming. "Let's do it." Over the next few weeks, Graham and Ava worked tirelessly to establish partnerships with other organizations that shared their vision. They met with leaders in education, healthcare, and technology, all while continuing to manage the day-to-day operations of the platform. The workload was intense, but they never lost sight of their mission. They were in this together, and no matter how difficult the path ahead seemed, they knew they were doing something that mattered. One evening, as they sat in their office overlooking the city, Ava turned to Graham, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. "We've come a long way," she said quietly. "I never imagined we'd be here." Graham looked at her, a deep sense of pride swelling in his chest. "You've done it, Ava," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've made it happen. You've changed everything." Ava shook her head, a small, humble smile on her lips. "We did it together," she replied. "I couldn't have done this without you." Graham felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He had spent so many years focused on his own ambitions, but working alongside Ava had shown him what true collaboration meant. It wasn't about one person leading, it was about lifting each other up, about building something stronger together than they ever could have alone. "I'm proud of us," he said, his voice soft. Ava smiled, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "Me too." As the months went on, the platform continued to grow, expanding into new countries, impacting even more lives. But for Graham, the greatest change was not in the business, it was in himself. He had spent his life chasing success, but now he knew that true success was about making a difference, about leaving a legacy that wasn't defined by money or status, but by the impact you had on others. And as he watched Ava lead the charge, he realized that this was the life he had always been meant to live, not one focused on building an empire, but one dedicated to building a better world. Together, they had created something that would last, something that would continue to change lives long after they were gone. And for Graham, that was the greatest success of all.